I would have loved being an anthropologist. Never putting on makeup, never having your hair done, never having a tight gown that you can't sit down in, which so many women love. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. I would love to live in a safari suit in a tent. I would, in Africa.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
This is a very special episode of Back to One. For years and years, I have been trying to interview the legendary Carroll Baker. She no longer acts. She's now a writer. And on the occasion of the publication of her new book, Who Killed Big Al?, she finally agreed to sit down with me in the beautiful National Arts Club in New York City over a few drinks to talk about the work. I don't want to hear your James Dean story. I don't want to hear your Clark Gable story. I don't want to hear your Gregory Peck story. I don't want to hear your George Peppard story. You know why? You are my James Dean.
Oh.
Okay, and I mean that.
Oh.
And if he was here and you weren't,
Yeah.
I'd be asking him about you.
Oh my God.
I really mean that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay, and if anybody wants to hear those stories, they could Google you and they could hear you talking about them, and they're wonderful stories.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
Yeah.
You know? But I'm blown away by you as an actress for a long time. And I've been wanting to meet you and talk to you about it for a long
that's
time.
lovely. Yeah.
And the very first line of your autobiography is, I have always lived too much inside my head.
Yes.
And you know, I feel the same way, and I think I can actually be a pretty good actor if I didn't live so much inside my head. I think that's the reason why I can't act.
Living inside your head makes you a good actor.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it makes you a very good actor.
Can you just talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, actually, you know, I was fortunate enough to go to the actor's studio. And before the actor's studio, I went to Lee Strasberg's private class. And you know who one of my classmates was? I can't think of his name.
So I guess we'll never know.
I guess you'll never know. Mike Nichols.
Mike Nichols, yes.
Mike Nichols.
Yes.
Yeah. And I watched him and I just knew that he was so special, more special than anybody else in class. And he asked me to work with him on a scene, and I refused. And he asked me again, and I refused. So after I'd become a Hollywood name, I ran into Mike, and he said to me, well, do you know why I've never cast you in any of my movies? I said, no, I never thought about it. Why? He said, because you wouldn't do a scene with me in Lee Strasberg's class. Wow. And really the reason I wouldn't do it is because I knew how strong he was. I knew how powerful he was. And if I was going to do a scene, I wanted to be the one to direct it. Wow. And so I always picked this guy that would just let me do whatever I wanted to do. And Mike Nichols said, you were always having a scene with Ed Easton. Who the hell is Ed Easton? Why do you do that to me?
In your autobiography, you talk about being a dancer, I think, right?
Yeah.
Early on.
Yeah.
But what in your early life prompted you to actually go to the actor's studio and engage in that kind of craft there?
Well, that happened much later on in my life. My father couldn't afford to, my mother and father were separated, and my father couldn't afford to send me to college. The boy that I was in love with, my first love, was going to college. All my friends were going to college. And I got a good paying job, but it was in a factory. So I said to myself, Carol, I don't think you want to spend your life in a factory. So what can you do? It really was just, what could I do? So the only thing I could do is I had some dancing lessons. So after work, I used to go up in our attic. It was an old tatty floor, so it didn't hurt, and practice my tap dancing. And I think I became really a good dancer. And in Greensburg, where I was, I'd never get any dancing jobs, so I don't know why I went ahead and did this and worked so hard on it. And then my mother wrote to me. She was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and she asked me if I'd like to come and be in St. Petersburg with her for a time. And I said yes. She was thinking I might go to St. Petersburg Junior College, but that wasn't in my mind because I'd been practicing dancing. So I told her that, I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be in show business. And she was wonderful about it. She, most people would say, oh, come on, you never do that. So St. Petersburg was a perfect place because they have all these clubs there and retired people and the Shriners Club and the Lions Club, all these things. And I applied and I got a job right away, $20 for doing my first dancing job. Wow. And I knew how to sew, so I also made my costumes. And this went on for a month or so. And I was invited to dance. The word went out that I was a pretty girl. I guess that's why I don't know that they thought I was so great a dancer or not. And I was invited to come to Daytona Beach and do 2 dances. It was the International Brotherhood of Magicians. So after I did my dance, I was sitting back at the table with my mother, and this rather old magician came up to me, and he said, he asked my mother, he said, I'm retired. I invent magic tricks now, so I'm retired. I don't have an assistant. Would you mind if your daughter held one hand of my turban? So, no, my mother and I were all for it. So I did. I held the end of the turban, and it was on fire. I don't quite remember the whole thing. But at any rate, at the end of the evening, he came up and he said, I'm retired. I invented a magic act, and it's for a woman. It's called the Magic Jewel Act. And I would love to teach your daughter magic and have her learn how to do this act. He said, I think it could be really a showstopper. I think it could be really wonderful. And she can come and live with my wife and I, and every day I'll coach her, I'll teach her. Now, mind you, I found out much later, much closer to this time than that he was really very famous. If I see any magician and I talk to them and I say Burling Hall, they say, oh, Burling Hall. Well, he was one of the tops. For the act, he used to call himself the Great Volta, and he burned things. So I learned this, and I said to him, well, I don't want to give up my dancing. He said, okay, you can dance around the room and produce. I said, okay, that's great. So he booked me into one of the last hangouts of vaudeville in North Carolina. It was called Kemp Time, K-E-M-P Time. You might want to look that up. It's a very interesting. And what it was is that after the movie was shown, then the act would come on. It was in movie theaters, and my act was actually, I guess it was terrific. I should have gone on with it, but I came out in black underwear, and there was a lucite box, and I pushed my hands over it like that and produced a blue gown and put the blue gown on. And then I danced around the room, and I knew I wasn't really terribly good as a sleight of hand, but he had it fixed so I was, and I would pick out jewels. Then I'd put them in a box and stir it, and they would come out as a necklace. there was a vanity table, and the vanity table, when I sat there, I was able to produce a tiara. So I really looked like a two-bit whore at the end because I was so covered in all this gleaming stuff. So I stuck with the vaudeville show for a long time.
So so we're talking about you're in your teens then?
Well, right after high school, yeah. So, they had, Kemp Time had two kinds of shows. One was the country western, and they had some very famous people who became famous. They had Andy Griffith, and they had Elvis Presley. So I had trouble eating the food. The hours were terrible.
Yeah.
You would finish the show at midnight, then you'd drive for like 3 hours and get a little bit of sleep and then get up and start the day and do the show all over again.
Yeah.
And we never played a theater more than one night. So now they wanted me, when you're in this kind of a variety show, they expect you to do more than just the act that you're interested in. So aside from the magic act, I had to dance in the chorus. There were only like 4 of us, but we were the chorus. And they wanted me to be with the baggy pants comedian. You know, where he drops his trousers and he's got these loud shorts on. Well, I couldn't do that. I was too embarrassed to do that. I was too young. So I volunteered to drive one of the cars. So we had
instead of that.
Yeah. So we had, instead of that. And it was very good for them too, because I didn't drink then.
Yeah.
And my eyesight and everything was wonderful. And the hills in the Carolinas, I don't know if you've ever been there, but you're up and down hills. But they were very safe having me drive this one car. So we had a van, and that had all the instruments and everything in it. And then we had 2 cars, and I drove one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then we played Washington, D.C. I'm not quite sure where it was in Washington, D.C. I'd never been there before. But I was tired of this. I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I left the show, and I came to New York. I had very little money, even though I didn't eat. I used to have, in the South, all this greasy food. I used to have ice cream almost all the time for dinner or lunch. And so I didn't have very much money with me. And I rented an apartment on Foyley Street in Queens. It was a basement apartment with a dirt floor. So obviously it was very cheap. Yeah. And I had all this magic stuff with me because I hadn't yet sent it back to him. And on days off, I used to do a conventional magic act, where you had a rabbit and pulled out things. Terrible, because the little boys knew everything. Mm-hmm. They used to point at me and say, "I knew how you're doing that. I saw you do that. That's up your sleeve." But I never did that. So I had this rabbit. Now, you don't have a rabbit if you have a dirt floor, because they're a rodent.
Yeah.
And this rabbit kept tunneling out, and I thought, oh, my landlady's going to see that. And so I thought, well, I'll get one more thing out of this rabbit. And I dyed my hair red. And I had a lovely green suit. It was just about my only lovely thing. And I put a leash on the rabbit. And I walked up and down Fifth Avenue and around church, the skating rink, everything. And I had heard this about New York, but this proved it. Not one single person turned around and even looked at me. So then the kids used to congregate at Radio City Music Hall. There was a little coffee shop there. I don't know whether it's there or not, but you soon found out that all the people who were looking for jobs in show business went to that coffee shop. And most of them, you could find out a lot of things, what was happening. And most of them sat there all day. And I just went from one place to the next place to the next. So at any rate, at one point, I got a commercial for Coca-Cola. Now, do you remember the Coca-Cola commercials with the girls in the bobby socks and sitting around? Okay, well, there was a very famous commercial, and there were like 4 or 5 girls sitting around drinking Coca-Cola. Now, in those days, everything was live. So if you were doing the advert, you were sitting there waiting for your turn, watching the show, and then it would stop for a minute, you'd get on stage, you'd do the commercial, and then they'd go back to the show. So one night I was watching a show, and it was an acting show. And I looked at these people on the stage, and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's so easy. Everything I've been doing is so hard. It's so difficult. It's so expensive. It's so everything. So I said, I'm going to be an actor.
Wow.
And I had just seen Marlon Brando. And I said, that's the kind of acting I want to do. So I found out it was Lee Strasberg. I went to Lee Strasberg's class. From that class, I was accepted into the Actors Studio, and I met Elia Kazan and Harold Clurman and all those famous people. And the word went out. I wasn't there very long. I really felt I needed to study, but I wasn't there very long because the Actors Studio had such a magical name in those days. And I don't know, 6, 7, 8 people from Hollywood came and wanted to do screen tests. I didn't want to do that because I didn't feel that I was ready yet. I didn't feel I was up to it. But, and some of the directors, I thought, gee, they're really crazy, you know, making you walk in a block or something like that, and then that's your audition. So, I said to myself, okay, Carroll, you cannot keep turning down these offers because they'll stop coming. So a friend of mine at the Actors Studio said, well, look, if you're so afraid to do your first film, why don't you just pick a great director? So I chose George Stevens because he was looking for the part in Giant. And that was how I became an actress.
How much of your talent did you already have before you walked in there? And how much of it was it just cultivated in there, or did you really, really get it from there?
Well, I suppose there had to have been some natural talent, but it was the Stanislavski method, which you know, turned out to be the greatest acting method that ever existed.
And you took well to that method?
Yeah.
It worked well for you. You didn't. It didn't fit you like
no,
glove.
I thought it was very interesting, and I liked doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after Giant, I came back to New York to the studio. I'm going to continue studying, and Kazan and Tennessee Williams came to me with Baby Doll. So that was it.
And what was your intention after Giant? Like, were you thinking, I want to get on the stage?
Oh, yeah, I would have done any kind of acting. And also...
You didn't want to head west, though. You're in Texas doing Giant. You didn't think, I need to go to L.A. now.
Oh, no.
But why? Tell me why.
Well,
I mean, because that was a big movie.
Well, because people were coming to me, and so, I mean, you know,
And you already had a life in New York,
Yeah, I had a life in New York, and I thought it all happens here. And I wanted to stay in New York.
And so Kazan had already had a shine on you already before Giant, was trying to mold you in the studio, or was it after Giant that he really started to?
Well, he used to visit periodically. He wasn't there every week. And I suppose, he took notice of all the people who were there. And the studio, as I said, was so magical because of the people they'd already turned out who were big stars. And they just came to me. It was amazing.
Yeah. And you had already met Jack at this time, or
I met Jack in the Actors Studio.
Yeah, before Giant. Yeah, because Jack was at Giant, right?
Yes.
Jack came out to Giant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to Jack.
He's in terrible state.
I gathered that from pictures I guess I just saw of him.
I went to the head people at the Actors Studio, and because I railed against Jack because I thought he was a terrible husband. But I went to the Actors Studio when I heard he was so ill, and I said, I think you should have a memorial for him here. Yeah. And that's very just, because he was the only one that ever did a production from the Actors Studio and used all studio people.
Right. And as a man, that was, right?
Yeah.
You're right. Well, that's very nice of you. I mean, so you...
No, it wasn't very nice of me. Well, I have kids, I want my kids to know that he wasn't a total bum.
Yeah. And I mean, so for better or for worse, he was a big part of your early life, right? Mm-hmm. And
he's a great acting teacher. He had a very lucrative business in France, in Paris.
Yeah. So I'm going to just jump to this part because we're talking about Jack a little bit. The beginning of your book, you talk about your first husband and this situation that is pretty much, you're a prisoner.
Yeah.
This man kept you from going out, basically. And
he bought me one fancy dress.
Yeah,
and
you say that in the book,
And I slept in it. I was all day in it. He had taken my money. I had been working in a club in Windsor, Ontario. And they said I could do a specialty dance, but they just put me in the chorus. And I had on a garter belt, and I had a few, dollar bills or whatever I had. And he took them away from me. So I didn't even have my own money.
Wow. Then, years later, Jack put you in this movie that I know you don't like, and frankly, with all due respect, I don't care that you don't like Something Wild. It's amazing. You're amazing in it. But it is basically about a person being imprisoned in a...
Yes.
And so I asked Jack once, when you directed Carroll in Something Wild, did you talk about this time when she was imprisoned years before that by a man?
Yeah.
And he said something like, she's making that up.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. And first of all, I didn't believe him, but I also thought you believed you were imprisoned, so it would be enough to use in the performance.
Yeah.
But did you connect it to this part of your life?
I never thought of that. I really never thought that out. Maybe because the Stanislavski method, whenever you do a part, you try to find within yourself something that is similar to, something that you can identify with the character and so forth. So I don't know, maybe. But the reason that I wasn't so crazy about it was, and I've seen it since, and it's a pretty good movie, I have to admit. But, I was very happy that Jack had a project that he got the whole thing started. He went to United Artists and talked and everything. And they gave us a very limited budget.
Yeah.
I used to laugh because in the hair department, I used to count the bobby pins.
I heard you say that once, yeah. Oh my God! And then Aaron Copland's salary came out of your salary.
Not my salary, my next salary. I had to do a second picture for them. And I did for them Mr. Moses in Africa with Bob Mitchum.
So
I
wait,
owed
that's
them a
even
film.
worse. That's even worse. So you're saying they didn't pay you for that film, instead they paid Aaron Copland for the score of Something Wild.
Yeah.
And Jack was fine with this.
I was too. It was the very beginning of people doing independent films.
Yes.
It was the very beginning.
Yes.
And Jack, who hadn't worked because he had personality problems with everybody. He got fired from everything, or, you know.
And it seems like later in your career, after Baby Doll, after Something Wild, in the Carpetbaggers era, Joe Levine era, has a lot of bad ideas about your career during that time.
Yeah.
That led you down a road of a direction that you didn't want to go down.
Well, yeah, but you know, I can't blame that all on him. I was very fussy about what I did. And there was a time, and this sounds ridiculous, it's an absolute true story. I had chosen films that didn't do much, and I had turned down films that were wonderful, that were big successes. So we used to go to a Chinese restaurant up on 125th Street. And at the end of dinner, I had a call before I went to dinner, I had a call from my agent saying, look, Carroll, there is this movie, they can't give you a script. I'm telling you that it's a wonderful, wonderful story, that every big name in Hollywood is going to be in it. And I know that, you know, you like to read the script and everything, but he said, please consider this, because it can't be bad with all these people, Spencer Tracy and everybody, accepting to be in this film and not seeing a script. So at the end of the Chinese dinner, my fortune cookie, go directly to Hollywood.
That said it in the fortune cookie.
And from the restaurant on the payphone, I called my agent and says, I'm in. And it turned out to be How the West Was Won, which I think was a terrific film.
Oh, yes. I wish they still made those fortune cookies like that. Instead, they have these stupid things.
I know. They're not fun anymore.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, Jack, I think, was on the set of How the West Was Won. Was he on that set?
No, he never came on the set. It was mainly all outdoors. So he would have been in the way. But we were there together, yeah.
He told me a story, and you tell me if you remember this or if this sounds right, where somebody comes on horseback to tell you your husband is not coming back from the war, and you get emotional. And John Ford comes over and says, Carroll, I think it's amazing that you are so easily able to cry, but you're playing a country person, and they try to be very.
It's totally made up. It's totally made up.
Wow. He probably manufactured it because he wanted to talk about how sometimes it's hard for people to cry, but in this case, Ford was saying, I don't want you to cry. I want you to hold back your tears here. You're saying?
No, never happened. Never happened.
Tell me if this one ever happened. I think it was Kazan. He tells this other story of you not being able to cry. And Kazan, for some reason, Kazan said, look, you take your time, you let me know when you're ready to do it, and you were not able to do it. And Jack said he came over and whispered something in your ear and walked away. Kazan. And you started to cry, they rolled, and Jack went over to Kazan and said, what did you tell her? And he said, I told her that we're just going to move on and do another scene. And that's what made her cry.
Well, it's partly true. It's partly true. And it's still the most difficult scene I ever had to play because I had to laugh and cry at the same time. Oh, yeah. And it was a funny scene, and the pigs were there. And so, yes, I was getting myself worked up so that I could really cry and then switch over to laughter and then cry again. It was the most difficult scene I ever did. And at a certain moment, Kazan knew that I was, trying to get myself into that state. He came over and he said, "Carol, we're going to lose the light." And that's what made me cry.
And what made you cry about that? Because the idea of it being...
The thought that I couldn't do the scene for Kazan, that I couldn't do Tennessee Williams' scene.
Because you didn't want to disappoint him.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
That's so interesting.
And myself, yeah.
Yeah. I think a miracle occurs in that movie that the Catholic Church should be afraid of. You created magic that was unlike anything that had been created before. And honestly, I don't think anybody has created anything since. There is the
swing scene can't
it's
be
a
beaten.
sexual, it's a sexual energy that every time you put on the movie, it is there. And that
I've never let my granddaughter see it.
Isn't it funny that you can't let your granddaughter see that?
I don't want her to see the swing scene.
Isn't that funny, though? Because there's nothing in that.
I know.
But I know what you mean. I don't want to watch it with my wife.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I know. Well, Kazan also, before he passed away, he had said that this is the most sensuous film I ever made.
Yes. So you created magic there, and I know that the story goes that you did have a feeling about Eli Wallach, but that, I think that belittles your performance, because a lot of people have feelings about people they're acting with, and they don't create what you created. So what was the environment like that allowed you to do that? I know Kazan is the actor's director of all time.
Absolutely, and that was my quote on the back of his autobiography, because he would take the actors one by one into a room and question them about the character that they were going to play, and dig and dig and dig to see what in your life would correspond to this. Also, the other thing that was wonderful that usually never happens in movies, it didn't even happen then when they were able to spend more money on a film, is the fact that we went there 6 weeks ahead of time. And we met all the local people, so that it was wonderful, because he's got these interesting faces and so forth. But also, it was a time when the South was still very much, segregated, and Northerners were Northerners, but he wanted the whole community to be a part of this film. So he invited them, he cast them, he sent us around to different people's homes to talk to them. And that too was a part of it. That created the atmosphere.
Yes.
And using the actual old house.
Yes.
That was...
Yes.
Yeah, that was magic.
Why didn't Kazan help you after Baby Doll?
What
in your career?
What happened was that I was and I didn't know this till years later. He could have taken me aside and said, "Carol, look, this is the position I'm in." But I had to be under contract to Warner Brothers, and I kept turning down everything they wanted to do with me. He had
because
called
they were all sex roles,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. And I didn't want to do a cheap imitation of Baby Doll.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to. Erskine Caldwell, they bought all the books. That's very clever on their part, but I didn't want to do it. Yeah. So it was a long time later that Kazan was going to do a play on Broadway. Well, I don't know that he was going to do it. Mike Gazzo had written a second play after Hatful of Rain, and he wanted Kazan to direct it. And Kazan said to me, well, he said, you're more important to this play than I am. Wow. And I said, because I wanted so badly to work with him again. And
what did that mean, though? What did he mean by that?
Well, he said, I don't know what it meant. He was angry with me because of me always being in trouble at Warner Brothers.
Oh.
And he said to me, and I mean, I read it in his autobiography, when he said they were the company that would always support me. And I had a hard time selling. But if he had said to me, you know, Carol, I have a hard time getting a film, you may think I'm famous, but I have a hard time getting a film financed. And Warner Brothers has been great to me. And you're my star that's at Warner Brothers, and you're causing all this dissension. I didn't know it.
Do you feel somehow burdened by your beauty or your sex appeal that people thought you had in terms of your career? Did you ever think to yourself, if I didn't have this, I would be able to do what I wanted to do?
Yeah, that was part of my fight with Warner Brothers, yeah. And they talked so much about sex when Baby Doll came out. And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to be just a stupid sex symbol of some kind. So I fought tremendously. And finally, Warner Brothers came to me and they said, okay, Bill Orr, Warner's son-in-law, came to me and said, okay, we've got a project for you. You're not going to want to turn this down. And I said, why? He said, because you'll play a nun. So I've been fought with him so often. I said, oh, yes, okay. The thing is that they got me into this film. I wasn't a nun, I was a postulate. And I'm standing with the other postulates at the gate. And Roger Moore comes riding by. He's got on this red uniform and he's on a white, beautiful white. And that was, I don't know, maybe 3-4 minutes of movie time. And off, I'm out of the convent and I'm lying in a field with him and they showed the trees shaking, which was supposed to be sex. Yeah. And then this woman became the greatest slut who ever went anywhere in Europe. She slept with everybody. There was a bullfighter, and there was a gypsy, and there was a painter, and I mean that's all. It was all it was. It just went from one man to the next.
So you're saying basically, you turned down everything, and they basically tricked you.
Yes.
Into doing.
Yes. Yes, I was going to be a nun.
So tell me then, after Carpetbaggers, it led into this phase in your career where you went to Europe and almost everything was this. Did you just give in? Did you just feel like it was just tired?
Well, no, the thing is I couldn't work in Hollywood anymore. I was blacklisted.
Because of the contractual disputes or because of some other reason?
Well, because Joe Levine was a very nasty man, and I had a contract with Paramount, but Joe Levine had a part of my contract. He was part of, should never have happened. And we just had a terrible, disagreement. I did so much work for him. I used to work with a publicity until I would just practically drop. I was so tired. And I got fired from Paramount. So I had 2 kids, a husband who wasn't working, and I went to Europe because I thought, well, I am a name. I went to Switzerland because I had worked once in Italy and I had worked a couple of times in Great Britain. So I thought, I'll see where the job offers seem to be, the best. And it was Italy. And yes, I got to work because I was a sex symbol. It's okay. I had to earn a living. It's okay.
Yeah. You had to do what you had to do.
Yeah.
Because of the way people were treating you, because of the way people were forcing you into doing certain things, even your husband, forcing you to publicity all the time that you depict in the book.
to the point of exhaustion. And people talking you out of doing stage work, talking you out of doing meaningful work that you wanted to do. I feel like that's all contributing to us not seeing you in your full potential at that time.
I see. Well, you know, I don't regret having worked in Europe. It was certainly different, very, very different. I'll tell you a great story. I went from Switzerland to Rome because they offered me a film. And this was like my first, you know, being in the whole scene, the whole European scene. So I have to go in to the office and talk to my father. And, and with big tears and everything, I tell him that I cannot be satisfied with just one man, that I'm in love with 5 men, and that he has to give me permission because I want to have a villa and I want to live with these 5 men. So this is the very first scene that I did. And of course I'm nervous and everything because it's another language, it's another country. So I go through this spiel, and the guy sitting behind the desk goes, and no sound comes out. And a voice comes from underneath the desk. So I look down and I say, "Excuse me, who are you?" He said, "I'm the actor playing your father." So then I sat up and I said, "Well then, man behind the desk, then who are you?" And he said, I'm the guy that delivers the pizza. And I come in, and the director, he say to me, "I like your face better than his. Sit down."
There is a whole other career that you have transitioned into. I mean, starting with Baby Doll, the book, which was an autobiography. That book is so good. It's so readable. You must have been writing your whole life before that. You can't just have started writing that.
Yeah, I was very good in school with writing. And I was in the Pennsylvania school system, which at that time was the greatest school system in America. It's been known for that. And I loved English and I loved writing. And as a matter of fact, they had at one grade, I don't forget which grade it was, but they had students submit short stories. And I got the prize from Pittsburgh Press. Also, when I came back from Vietnam, I wrote a series about what happened in Vietnam, and it was printed in, I don't know whether it was the news or the other paper. And I don't have a copy of it, I don't know, but people loved it.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy writing very much.
So I'm not a big mystery novel fan, you know, but I wanted to read Who Killed Big Al because I love you. This was so much fun.
I know
to read, and
yeah. Well, I was highly influenced by Agatha Christie. As a matter of fact, one of my friends who read Who Killed Big Al said to me, "Oh, I'm never going to have dinner with you again." And I said, "Why?" He said, "How do you know about all these poisons? How do you, this poison, that poison, this berry, that?"
Yeah.
And I said, "That's Agatha Christie. She did all the she did all the work on that. Found out, and I just copied from her."
So you must get a lot out of writing, then. Is it?
Oh yes, it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a wonderful feeling. This is just the most wonderful thing. That I have this book out at the age of 88.
Yeah.
I can't believe it myself. And I love it, and I love all the characters, and I'm just enjoying myself so much.
When you look back on your career. You don't act anymore now. When you look back on this whole thing, do you look back with a fondness? Do you look back with regret?
I don't miss it.
Yeah.
I don't miss it. I was very happy to retire and sleep in the mornings. And also, I never really thought of myself so much as an actress. I thought of myself as somebody who was in show business.
And what is the difference?
The difference is you're an all-around artist if you're in show business. You sing, you dance, you make jokes. I never really thought, and as far as looking back, I never look back.
You don't? The last line in Baby Doll is something like,
oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Do you have it at the ready? Do you know what it is exactly?
Yeah, because we started the film and there was no ending.
Right.
And that is so troublesome in filmmaking. You've got to have it. And then Tennessee came up with what I think is one of the most brilliant endings of all time, because it has to do with tomorrow.
Yes.
The way he used tomorrow. And Archie Lee is in the car, and he says to the sheriff who's standing outside, he said, "Oh, that's my baby doll's birthday. What's going to happen tomorrow?" And the sheriff says, "Hey, I'm the sheriff. I don't know nothing about tomorrow." And then there's Aunt Rose and I on the porch, and she said, "Oh, what's going to happen tomorrow?" And I say, well, it's not exactly right, but I say, well, we'll have to wait and see if we're remembered or forgotten.
Beautiful.
I think that's a great ending.
Do you care if you're remembered or forgotten?
Do I care?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I didn't think you did.
I don't think so.
A lot of people wouldn't say that, A lot of people really want to be remembered.
They have their walls plastered with pictures of themselves.
But
and
what
everything.
is it? What is it about you that doesn't care?
Well, because it wasn't something that I chose. It was something that I just sort of fell into.
Interesting.
And when I went to Africa, and I went twice, and the last time I spent a long time there, and I knew that I would have loved being an anthropologist. Never putting on makeup, never having your hair done, never having a tight gown that you can't sit down in, which so many women love. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. I would love to live in a safari suit in a tent. I would, in Africa.
And you're not mad at men for putting you in all those things?
Putting me in what?
In all those makeups and dresses and...
No, if anything, I'm fiercely independent. And I don't do anything I don't want to do. And so when I was called upon to do that, I did it. It's just, I didn't love it like some women love it,
Right. Carroll Baker, Maestro. It's an honor to sit with you.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, and my pleasure too.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.